Cenk, it's great to see you here in Los Angeles. I feel like we've been seeing each other from across the water, often in very quite tense and fractious circumstances with big debates. So it's good to see you just one-on-one. And we're going to come to Israel, and we'll come to the US election. You, of course, are running for president. But first, let's talk about the Epstein scandal, which every single day seems to produce ever more lurid headlines. What do you make of it?
Well, it's important because it's people in power that did terrible things and seem to have largely gotten away with it. So I like that people care about accountability on this issue. The problem is we don't really know exactly who did it and exactly what they did. So, you know, you've got Bill Clinton saying I was on the plane, but I wasn't on the island.
You've got Richard Branson, who's come out vehemently denying there's any sex tape of him, as was supposedly revealed yesterday. There's lots of claim, counterclaim going on, very little hard evidence, which is indisputable, which could lead to potential consequence.
Yeah, so when he first died in prison, I thought, okay, there's going to be something that's determinative here. Did the video in the hallway in the prison work or did it not work? If it worked and we see that no one went into his cell, okay, then it's a suicide. I'm not particularly fond of conspiracy theories, etc. But if it didn't work, okay, well then that's a totally different issue. And as it turns out, oh golly gee, the guards were off and the video didn't work. Well, that leads you to many other speculation by nature of this beast, right? But look, even Trump was terrific friends with Epstein for a long, long time and said he knows that Epstein likes them young. So there's no question that he knew that Epstein was up to terrible things. But did he do it? I don't know. It's easy for the two sides to say, Clinton definitely did it, Trump definitely did it, but we don't actually know.
A lot of political game playing going on with the various names and different attitudes depending if it's one of your party. There's also, I think, with the Epstein scandal, a sense that you look at it in totality. You have Epstein, who was in jail and may have taken his own life or may have had it taken from him. We'll probably never know. The only other person who's been brought to account is Ghislaine Maxwell, his kind of madame figure in the whole thing. None of the other men who must have either known about Epstein's proclivities or actively joined him in some of them have ever been properly brought to book for this. Do you think they ever will?
Well, hard to tell, but one of the things that makes me wonder and why I brought up the videotape in the prison is because Epstein was supposed to have videotapes of a lot of this.
Right.
And yet we magically still haven't found the videotapes.
Right.
And under the Bush administration, the guy who let him go wound up, by the way, being the labor secretary for Trump. He's the one that let Epstein off the hook in the first place, right? Back in 2008. So magically, everyone keeps getting let off the hook in this case, except Ghislaine Maxwell and
Also, it seems to me there's sort of life before his first conviction and life after it, i.e. before the first conviction, then you can completely believe that people may have been, conned by this guy. He was a big finance guy. There'd be no reason potentially to know what he was really like. But once he had that conviction in the early 2000s for, effectively a sex crime with a minor, pedophilia. Once that happened, everyone who then continued to deal with him from Prince Andrew onwards, they surely are culpable by association.
Yeah, I think after 2008, you have no excuses at all. And everybody, I remember covering that story, and I remember saying, this is ridiculous. This is a slap on the wrist for a guy who might have done an enormous amount of pedophilia and been connected to, at the time we already knew he was connected to tons of people in finance, politics, people in power. After that, going back and still associating with him probably means you're an addict. Probably means you're not only don't mind that at all, but can't help but go and seek that out.
And what about that deal that was done at that time? I mean, it was such a murky, looking back now, terrible deal with the devil, it seems.
Yeah, no question. And that's what makes people speculate. So why are there so many conspiracy theories now in America? Because the people in power keep lying. And so they'll say things like, oh, money in politics doesn't affect politicians. They take millions of dollars in campaign contributions, but they're not affected at all. That's just the corporation's talking to them. It's absurd. And in the Epstein case, you have this guy who says, oh, this child molester, serial child molester, is going to serve a short time in prison, but he's not even really going to be in prison. He's going to get to go out during the day and still conduct business and still make a lot of money, right? Which no other prisoner gets. Almost no other prisoner gets that privilege. But since you're a child molester, wait, you should have less privileges, not more privileges. And it was a joke of a sentence. And at that moment, everyone knew that the people in power, we didn't know who exactly and why exactly, but we knew that someone was putting their thumb on the scale saying, do not prosecute this guy. And remember, that was under a Republican administration, and a guy who was the prosecutor there was rewarded later by Trump and given a cabinet position.
Will it have any bearing on the election this year?
Probably not, because people on both sides are implicated. And of course, they're treated differently, right? The Republicans think it's only Democrats because they have a mind freeze on anything that involves Trump. Even though Trump says, I was great friends with him, he's a terrific guy, he said back in the day, and I knew that he likes them young, right? They're like, nope, I don't hear it, I'm MAGA, my brain is frozen, I don't listen to anything that's anti-Trump ever. And the Democrats, they're terrible at politics anyway, they're not gonna be able to put it on Trump. There's 1,000 things on Trump and nothing ever sticks. Let's
come to the election. You're running for president. I mean, do you genuinely have any belief you could win? What is your real purpose for running?
Yeah, so I have 3 missions. So let me tell you the first one, which is Joe Biden's going to lose, and I need to push him out. He's at 33% right now. No one has ever recovered from being that low as an incumbent for any federal office, let alone president. He's down 14 points with independents. He's down 4 points with younger voters. He's down 5 points with Latinos. It is a disaster for Joe Biden. And right now, if we don't get him out, we are definitely going to lose to Donald Trump. He's losing every single swing state. We have to act now to get new candidates in. It is the Democratic Party basically saying, we don't mind losing. We're okay with it. Trump's going to take away democracy. That's okay. And that's mission number 1.
He would say, I beat him last time.
Yeah, I would say you were 19 points higher last time. It is an insane proposition to say that time has frozen and 4 years ago is the same as today. It's like any football team, whether it's a European football or American football, saying, hey, I was great 4 years ago, so I'm the only one that could beat the top team now. It makes no sense. He's down 24 points. Actually, he's down way more from his height. He's down 14 points with independents. He's down to 33% approval rating. Look, Piers, I can give you 100 stats, but the bottom line is, no one with an approval rating this low has ever won for any federal office when they were this far down in an election season. That means Joe Biden would have to pull off literally the greatest political comeback in American history. Does anyone in their right mind think he's capable of that? There's no way he can do it. So that's the number 1 reason I'm in, but there are 2 others.
What are the other 2?
So number 2, I'm a naturalized citizen, and there is this mythology that you have to be natural born to run in America. It is not at all true. It has been amended by the 14th Amendment that says all persons born or naturalized have due process and equal protection. And we're going to the courts, and in fact, we have a hearing on Wednesday in district court in South Carolina, and we're going to prove that this was already amended out of the
So you want to make history?
Definitely.
And the third reason?
And the third reason is to win. So now you say, well, it's a long shot. I agree it's a long shot. So where's the angle for possible victory here? Well, you win the case in the courts, and people think, well, that's miracle number 1. He was supposed to not even have a chance. He was supposed to not be eligible. But it turns out we were wrong and he was right. And he did something that no one thought was possible. Now I'm in the race officially and legitimately according to everyone, right? I'm already in according to our argument. And then they turn around and start polling me. Well, I know one-on-one. We did a poll already with YouGov, legitimate poll that everybody else uses. One-on-one versus Biden, I'm at 17 points. So you're telling me I can't get to 20, 25, 35, et cetera. I've got a narrow window, I acknowledge that, right? But once we can win the case, everything is eminently possible.
How much of Biden's unpopularity is specific to his age? In other words, if he was Gavin Newsom, who is currently the incumbent president, with the record that Biden has had in the last 3 years, would he be polling much higher?
So yes and no. A lot has to do with his age. 77% of Americans have said that they are concerned that he will not be healthy enough to finish a second term. Now think about that number. That is over 3/4 of Americans saying, he's too old, please don't run him. We're worried he's not
Including
going to
a
make
vast
it.
majority of Democrats.
Including a huge percentage of Democrats. It is political malpractice to run Biden when over 3/4 of the country says, I'm sorry, but he's too old.
But is that the factor? In other words, if you judged him purely on his record, which is what his defenders say, he's actually done a pretty good job. Do you buy into that?
No. So that leads to the second issue. Age is definitely an issue whether we like it or not. And it's not just that he's old, it's that he looks and acts old. You see Bernie Sanders, you see Donald Trump, and they look energetic.
I know people a lot older than Joe Biden who are completely whip smart. It's not his actual age. Mick Jagger is a few months difference in age and still does 2.5-hour shows every night, right? I mean, this idea that it's just because he's 81 or whatever it is, that's for the birds. It's actually, clearly, he is disintegrating. I mean, to be brutal.
I mean, look, yes, but here's the thing. Democrats get really upset when you say that, but it's not going to go away.
It doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yes, and when you ask any real person in America that is not involved in politics, what do you think of Joe Biden? 100 out of 100 says he's too old.
Yeah.
That is what they start with. Now, but that is not the only issue. So in office, how is he done? You know, people say, oh my God, he did more than a normal Democratic president. That is a very low bar. Democratic presidents barely try. So did he do most of his agenda? No. 85% of his agenda is dead, and there's no dispute over that. The media says, oh my God, he did 15% of his agenda. What an American hero. I don't find that to be heroic at all. He said he'd do the public option. He didn't even propose it. He said that he would do $15 minimum wage. He threw it under the bus in the very first interview that he did. He never intended it. Paid family leave, Piers, polls at 84% in America. What kind of politician are you if you can't get a bill passed that polls at 84%? That's 74% among Republicans. If you can't get that passed, honestly, you suck at politics.
Let's talk about his potential opponent. If it ends up being a Biden-Trump rematch, Biden's belief, from what I hear, is that he beat him before and he can beat him again because the anti-Trump vote will come out, and he may have a point. But it's incredible to people outside of America that Donald Trump, who lost last time, has been pretty much a consistent loser in the electoral process since 2016, both in the midterms, the general elections, Senate, and so on. That he's now facing nearly 100 criminal charges, and yet all that has done is fuel him and make him more popular, allow him to play the victim and see his poll numbers go up. What does that say about America and your political system?
No, it says something really important that media almost never talks about. To give you full context, in one of the latest polls, Trump is up by 8 against Biden. And remember, the Democratic candidate must win the popular vote by 5 points. If not, they lose the Electoral College. Biden won by 4.5 and nearly lost. Only 44,000 votes in swing states made the difference. So you have to win by 5. That means Biden is down by 13 to Donald Trump, who is otherwise an enormously unpopular candidate. My God, if he was up against a popular candidate, he'd get landslided. He might get Walter Mondale and lose 49 states.
But is one of the reasons that Trump is proving so not just durable, but potentially going back to the White House, that the Democrats, the liberal world, for want of a better phrase, has overplayed its hand. And the reason I say that, I remember in 2016, the very next day after that election win, I was in New York, went to see the New York Knicks with my eldest son. And Chris Rock, the comedian, was at the next table in this area we're in. And we got talking about the election. And he said, you know the problem? He said, if someone like Trump kills 10 people, don't go around saying he's killed 11. I thought it was such a smart take on it. In other words, we would say in England, don't over-egg the souffle. Don't exaggerate when you have someone like Trump, because it allows him to say, look at these people. They've lost their minds. They're saying this when it's not true, when in fact there may be a good kernel of truth to go at him about. Has the liberal world overplayed through its demonic hatred of Trump? Has it overplayed its hand and helped him?
Yes and no. So Donald Trump deserves almost all the criticism that he gets, and he breaks so many laws that he floods the zone. And then you don't know what to respond to because he says something maniacal here, he broke that law there, he's a lifelong criminal, etc. But the number one issue is the one that the media doesn't talk about, which is he's anti-establishment. That's why people like him. Is there a portion of the Republican base that likes the xenophobic, racist, sexist, etc. talk? Yes, there is. If you deny that, you're denying reality.
He can also be, let's be fair, not to be fair, let's be accurate, he can be genuinely funny. I mean,
Oh, no question.
if you watch his rallies, it's like watching a 2-hour show.
Yes.
You know, it's like watching a right-wing version of Ricky Gervais, right? So I see that appeal. He's a great performer. He's also, I said Mr. Jordan Peterson on Monday, he has both the thinnest skin of any human being I've ever met and the thickest.
Totally, yes.
He reacts to everything with venom. Started criticism, bang, 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 but he also can soak up incredible amounts of pressure that would crush any other candidate.
Yeah, so look.
Makes him a formidable politician.
Oh, he is, no question about it. So Democrats underestimate him at their peril, and they do it over and over again. So there's three issues here. One is, yes, he did do all those things, and sometimes the Democrats overreach anyway, right? Number two is what you're pointing out, which is that he's telegenic. He not in terms of looks, but in terms of he's entertaining.
He's charismatic.
Yes, and what Democrats don't understand is, sorry, but politics is now all media wars. That's what it is. Where do people get the information on who they're going to vote? Media, some form of media, not necessarily mainstream media, but some form of media. So you have to engage in the media wars, and Trump is fantastic at engaging in the media wars. He goes to wherever the cameras are, he grabs the spotlight. What does Biden do? Biden made his first speech against Trump just a couple of days ago. What are you waiting for, brother? He's done 200 speeches in the time that you've done one. That is a colossal media advantage and hence a colossal political advantage. And you're not wrong. Oftentimes he is both wittingly and unwittingly funny. So we laugh at him all the time. He says the most absurd, ridiculous things. Now, but the third part of it is he's giving a giant middle finger to the establishment. And that is the largest reason for his the popularity that he has. He's unpopular overall, but among his base, it's less the xenophobic stuff. Yes, it's a little bit of entertainment, but mainly they love that finally someone said what they've been dying to hear, which is screw the establishment. The people in power have been totally screwing you your whole life. Now, the Democratic Party has people like that, like me, but they never let them out. They say, oh no, you better not. You better not. The establishment is beloved. Is it? The polling indicates that they hate you. They hate the politicians, they hate Congress, they hate media, but media goes, no, they're wrong. Well, of course you're going to say that. You're in the media, right? So the Democrats have no idea what's coming. Piers, look, I said this back in 2016. I went on ABC's This Week right after the DNC when Hillary was at her height, and I said Donald Trump's going to win. Now, I don't want Donald Trump to win. I'm in this race. Why do I want to knock Biden out? Because I don't want him to lose to Trump.
If Biden is the candidate, do you think Trump wins if he wins the Republican nomination?
It's near 100%. So look.
And what would that mean for America?
Disaster. Total, epic disaster. So let me break it down. So as I said earlier, no candidate for any federal office has ever come back from this far down. And Biden is losing all 7 swing states, and he has to win by 5. If you're an objective political analyst, there's no way in the world anyone in their right mind could say that he has anything approaching 50% chance. At best, in my opinion, he has about a 10% at best. I've never seen anyone do it, and Biden refuses to campaign. So I think that if a strong third-party candidate comes in, Biden finishes third. He has no support, no base whatsoever. Now he's losing young people by 4 points. He's losing Latinos by 5 points. For a Democratic candidate, totally, utterly untenable. He is a guaranteed loss. That's why I'm in the race. We have to push him out. Otherwise, we have no chance of winning. We're handing the country over to Trump. Now to the second question. So how bad is that? Well, Trump already tried a coup. So if MAGA wants to catch feelings over that, they can go ahead and cry. They love to cry. Oh, we just violently broke into the Capitol and had a fake elector plot to steal democracy. Why are you guys getting all bent out of shape? We were just trying to coup, right? And by the way, there's guys on tape on January 6th going, we're doing a revolution, right?
Well, imagine what they'll say if Trump was to win and the Democrats simply say, we're not accepting it. We refuse to accept the result.
Yeah, of course.
That is the consequence of not accepting the result of democratic free elections, is that if you then end up winning, why should anyone else accept your result?
So, Piers, I'm going to criticism for the Republicans and the Democrats here. So for the Republicans, remember the original idea that Trump had was Mike Pence cannot certify the election and instead certify the fake electors that they had ready, right? Well, if that's true that Mike Pence could do that, then Kamala Harris could do it.
Of course.
So that means, according to Trump's logic and MAGA's logic, if there is such a thing, that means Kamala Harris can just say, I don't care that Biden lost 28 states. I don't care if he lost 38 or 48 states. I'm not certifying it. Instead, I'm certifying our fake electors. So look, the right wing in this country does not believe in democracy. They believe in power. So they believe it's our country and we will get it by any means necessary. We will take it. So that's the right wing. That's the disaster that awaits us. And then the Democratic Party, why did they wait 2.5 years to try to prosecute Donald Trump? Merrick Garland should have gone on day one. When you wait for 2.5 years, then the voters go, wait, you did it just as he was running. It seems political.
Even Republicans who don't support Trump are now supporting him in large numbers because they believe the Democrats have overreached in the way that he's being prosecuted. And I can understand that. It's the same way they try to take him off the ballot. My first reaction was, why would you do that? All that does is make him more popular. And by the way, the Supreme Court inevitably will throw this out anyway. So you won't succeed. All you'll succeed in doing is making them even more popular.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's still folks that I have a lot of adjectives for. I'll try to keep it under control. That still say 91 indictments. Well, all it's done is made him more popular.
Yes.
When are you going to get it through your thick, thick skull that people don't think like you do? So this normal person who's a liberal in Washington is like, well, I am outraged and I would never vote for anyone with 91 indictments. Yeah, brother, but you're not the average voter. The average voter doesn't see it that way and hasn't seen it that way. And the polling has showed it for nearly a year. When is it going to get through your incredibly thick head? By the way, Piers, there might be a disagreement that you and I have, which is that I think almost all of these cases are perfectly legitimate as long as you did them in the right time frame. They should have launched them the minute after the election because there was law breaking, and you, as a prosecutor,
here's what I think.
You must pursue law breaking.
I think some of it is clearly legitimate to go after him over, and we'll see whether it leads to any convictions. But when you start with him paying off a porn star for a secret night of passion behind his wife's back, and I think, really, is that your starting point for going after Donald Trump?
So
to me, it trivialized it so much in most people's eyes. They were like, this looks pathetic.
I don't agree at all. And so,
Really?
Yeah, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Number one, that is a clear violation of the law, and his co-conspirator, Michael Cohen, already went to prison for it. So if we say Michael Cohen should go to prison for it, but Donald Trump shouldn't because he's above the law, I think that's a terrible precedent.
I'm looking at what most average Americans probably made of that. And most average Americans are like, all right, he had a fling with a porn star behind his wife's back. He wants to keep it quiet. He pays her off. They see payoffs all the time in the world of entertainment, media, politics, and so on. They read about this stuff all the time. It doesn't strike them as either particularly shocking or scandalous, even if it may be illegal.
Yeah, I understand that urge by the average voter because they see all these campaign contributions, you know, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that go into all these greasy politicians' hands, and the media comes out and goes, there's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong with it at all, they're just talking, right? And it doesn't affect the bills at all. These are pure, honorable politicians. So when they turn around and say to Trump, hey, you're doing something wrong by giving $150,000 to your mistress, then it feels like it's wrong. But on the law, we have to decide, are we actually implementing the law, or are we saying that people in power are the elites? And let's be honest, MAGA, if you don't get it by now, the reason why they didn't prosecute Trump in the first place is because he's among the elites. And they were worried that if they prosecuted him in the beginning, that the Republicans might prosecute Biden and other people. That's why they waited 2.5 years, and then they panicked. They're like, oh no, he's running and he's popular, and this Joe Biden can't beat anyone. It's super obvious he can't beat anyone. We have to take everyone off the ballot. Take Trump off the ballot, and by the way, they've taken me off the ballot in a lot of states, and they've taken, in 4 American states, in very important states, they have taken every Biden challenger off the ballot in the primaries. And then they turn around, Piers, and say, democracy's on the line. Well, if
When
democracy
actually
is on the
they're
line, you've
trying
got
to-
a funny way of showing
Yeah,
it.
you don't fight democracy on the line by thwarting democracy.
Exactly.
Let's turn to Israel and the war in Gaza. We've had some very emotive debates involving you and many other people. Had a little break, come back now to see nothing's changed on the ground. Perhaps the world's attention is less obsessively now on there than it was. What is your take on where we are with this war?
Yeah, so today we read that Israel's going to start to withdraw a little bit from Gaza. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. Israel has been brutal. They've now killed about 20 times the number of people that Hamas did. I don't believe that a state is immune from charges of terrorism or genocide. They say, well, we're a state, so we can't, when we murder civilians, it's perfectly kosher. Sorry, it isn't, okay? It's just as barbaric, just as terrible.
Tell me we've argued a lot about this. Tell me the difference, this is playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Between going after ISIS in Iraq and Syria and eradicating pretty much ISIS, but in the process killing a lot of civilians, and what Israel is now doing with Hamas, where they believe they've killed maybe as many as 10,000 Hamas terrorists, which is maybe a third of the total. I mean, I call them terrorists because I believe there's no other way to describe what they did on October the 7th.
That's no problem. And I would argue that Israel is taking terrorist actions.
Which is entirely your prerogative.
Yeah.
My point is, what's the distinction in your eyes, morally, between the deaths of civilians when the world went after ISIS in places like Iraq and Syria, and what's happened in Gaza?
Yes. So there's a couple of really, really important differences. So number one, America, even when we were going after ISIS, even when we were bogged down in Mosul in the biggest guerrilla warfare we've ever seen within a city, never dropped a bomb bigger than 500 pounds. Because we thought that's a war crime. We can't go above 500 pounds because that's indiscriminate killing of civilians. Israel is dropping 2,000-pound bombs, and a lot of them are unguided. What that means is, I don't give a damn who it kills. I don't care if it's a terrorist, which, by the way, are mainly under the tunnels. What I laughed at was the idea that they killed 10,000 Hamas fighters.
Right,
no one
we
believes
don't
that.
know.
We don't know, but no one believes
I
that.
challenged the Israeli spokespeople many times. They don't know, right? They don't actually know any of those stats, right? They believe that may be the kind of ballpark figure. It's not been denied by Hamas, so you have to assume it might be correct. But even if it is, that still means there are maybe 3/4 of Hamas left.
Yeah, so first of all, IDF has shown through their own videos that the tunnels are largely intact. We know Hamas is in the tunnels, so all logic and evidence indicates that they barely got any Hamas fighters. So, but okay, whatever. You've got Israeli propaganda, you've got Hamas propaganda, but there's no question, everyone agrees, the great majority of the people killed were innocent civilians, children and women, largely. So, now in the ISIS case...
And it's been horrific. I mean, there's no two ways about it. When you see these scenes from Gaza, the obliteration of northern Gaza, the same now going on in the south, the fact that Gaza's population is half children, the sheer volume of children being killed on a daily basis is utterly horrendous. The question becomes, this has been a question I've raised many times from the start of this war, is after what Hamas did on October the 7th, what is morally justifiable in terms of a response by Israel? And I don't have the answer. I'm just curious what you think it is.
So number one, it is not indiscriminate killing of civilians, and that is almost certainly what we had in Gaza. 85% of Gazans are now homeless because 70% of the buildings are either destroyed or damaged. So what they did was one of the biggest war crimes we've ever seen in our life. That is not a proportional response. I've said on your show before, I think they should go in with special forces. You have to get the hostages, and I understand that you've got to go after the Hamas fighters, okay? And that is fair. If you attack from your territory, you should expect special forces back. Special forces work. They worked in the case of bin Laden, and oftentimes they worked in the case of ISIS. We did not do giant bombings of Iraq, Syria, etc. We had plenty of war crimes on our hands too, as America executed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but nothing on the scale of what Israel has done. To give you a sense of it, we killed less civilians in 20 years in Afghanistan than Israel killed in 2 months in Gaza. So they dropped 29,000 bombs in a city the size of Las Vegas. The sheer terror of that is indescribable. So you send in special forces, you do something. But most importantly, this goes to your question about how is it different than ISIS and how to resolve it. ISIS doesn't represent anyone. ISIS doesn't represent an ethnic group. They claim they represent a religious group, but they're radicals and they don't represent Muslims at all in general, right? But Hamas is fighting a war because of the occupation. And the occupation of the Palestinians is untenable. So every day that you have an occupation, you're going to have a resistance.
And it's undeniable that there's been occupation.
Yeah.
And we know that because when this latest war started, the fact that Israel was able to turn on the taps of energy and water, fuel and so on, the fact they could do that, stop the food coming in and out, that is what an occupation involves. It means you control somewhere which is not legally yours to control, and you're controlling it. So I don't think you can argue, whoever side you come down on this, you can't argue against the idea that there's been occupation, nor can you argue that a lot of the more right-wing members of Netanyahu's cabinet, some of whom are extreme far-right people, that they have no concern about what is happening and would be quite happy to see all 2 million Palestinians gone. And they would love to just take that land. Now, that's also undeniable, which is one of the reasons why Netanyahu has dug himself into a very difficult position politically, I think, for his own future, by packing this cabinet with all these hard right people purely to get himself elected prime minister again. He now finds himself under their control.
Yeah, there's no question about a whole heap of talking points that we hear nonstop in America. Some people do sophistry and say, well, is it technically apartheid, technically occupation? What difference does it make? As you point out, they control those areas. Those are open air prisons. They can cut off the water, power, electricity anytime they want. The Palestinians can't control their own borders. It's obviously oppression by any name. And then they say, oh, Hamas uses human shields. Well, they live in an area that is filled with civilians that you keep in an open-air prison. So
that doesn't mean Hamas don't use them as human shields. I don't actually think Hamas has shown by its behavior in the last 17 years where they've had power in Gaza that they have any real concern for the welfare of Palestinian civilians.
No, I don't think they do. Hamas is Muslim fundamentalist, and so whenever you have oppression, unfortunately, fundamentalism grows. That's a great breeding ground.
So there can't be a future with Hamas in charge, can there?
Yeah, I don't think so, no.
I mean, let's cut to the quick here about how this ends.
Yeah.
People talk about the day after the war. How do you think this ends, and what is the smartest way for everyone to go forward when the war is over?
So let me handle that in two ways. The current path that Israel is on is, well, Hamas made us kill all your kids. That's an absurd thing to claim. If you're so powerful, why is Hamas making you kill their civilians? That's absurd. And then they say, oh, the war ends when Hamas surrenders. Nobody thinks they're going to surrender. That's an absurd standard. What are they going to say? Okay, oh, I'm right here, come and bomb me,
so
or come and arrest me. So but there is a real way that it can end. So you make a deal with the Palestinian Authority, and the Biden administration has finally woken up and begun to go in this direction,
but
which
they
I
are
applaud.
totally discredited,
no,
riddled with corruption.
That's right. But I'll tell you how you fix that problem. It's in one bundle. It's actually relatively straightforward. You take the Palestinian Authority, which you are right, is reputationally damaged, not just in Israel, but more importantly with the Palestinians for collaborating with Israel for all this time for the occupation. You make a peace deal with them, you do the two-state solution now, right now. Not 20 years from now, not after 50 years more of occupation. You do it now, and you do it with the Palestinian Authority. That then buys them the credibility to be able to go and control Gaza. If they go into Gaza now, they look like collaborators. But if they go into Gaza with a peace deal and say, we got a Palestinian state, then they have enough credibility to be able to control Gaza and the West Bank and be a real partner for peace. Piers, you know that isn't the real problem. Abbas would probably do that deal in a minute. That's a lifeline for him, and he gets to be a hero. Netanyahu says, I don't want the deal. He said, I'm so proud that I blocked the Palestinian state, and I'm going to keep on blocking it. So there is one person totally responsible for the carnage, Benjamin Netanyahu.
I mean, I would say Hamas is also responsible. I would say that Netanyahu is very damaged. He may not survive this himself. And he is at the behest now and under control of his right-wing cabinet, which is incredibly unfortunate for those like you and I who would like to see peace be achieved here. How long do you think this war is going to go on for?
So we have a problem with Netanyahu on a second front, which is that he's corrupt, he has these charges, he's lost the Israeli population, and I don't want people making assumptions about Israel and the people that live there. Look at how unpopular Netanyahu is with his own population, right? And there is no democracy in Israel overall because they imprison 5 million Palestinians, but there is democracy within Israel itself for them, right? And within that democracy, you have a vibrant media, et cetera, that criticizes Netanyahu. So the reason why I say Netanyahu is primarily responsible is because even if you blame Hamas, and that's fair, well, he's the one that aided and abetted Hamas. He's the one that helped them get funding. He's the one that thought it was a brilliant idea to have them as a counterweight to the Palestinian Authority.
He liked the fact it fractured the Palestinian politically.
Exactly. He's the one that let his guard down on October 7th, and he was busy helping the settlers oppress the Palestinians in the West Bank and didn't help his people. But since the only thing that keeps him in power, especially at this point in time, is the war, he has a built-in incentive to never end the war. So somehow the Israeli population has to regain control of their government. And you know, in a parliamentary system, that's easier than in a presidential system. And so they've got to call for an election, and they've got to get the guy out right now. Hey, we're going to get him out after the war. Means that you're going to have endless war.
But the problem is the polls show that whilst there's a lot of unpopularity for Netanyahu, and he would certainly lose an election if it was held tomorrow on that basis, and a lot of it is driven by, they blame him for what happened on October the 7th. There's also widespread support in Israel for what the IDF are doing in terms of response. So you have these two things running concurrently. Yeah. Netanyahu personally very unpopular, but what the IDF are doing under his command as prime minister is very popular.
Yeah. So look, there's two issues. One is Netanyahu is in charge and we don't have elections and we can't get him out even though the Israelis want him. Second, want him to get out. The second issue is, you're right, it's not just an Netanyahu problem, it's an Israeli right-wing problem. And right now, the rest of his cabinet is a bunch of monsters, ghouls and goblins, who are openly, brazenly talking about ethnically cleansing the Palestinians in ways that are sometimes even more vicious than Netanyahu. And talking about starting a war in Lebanon, starting a war in Iran, that is insanity, total insanity. So, look, at some point, if the Israeli population does not choose peace, we're all doomed for endless war in the Middle East. But if the Israeli population in an election chooses peace for the first time since the Yitzhak Rabin, then all of this can be solved. And relatively quickly, Saudi Arabia still says they want to do an agreement with Israel. Most of the Middle East wants to do a deal with Israel, and the Palestinian Authority wants to do a deal with Israel. The people blocking that is the right-wing government of Israel. Get in a moderate government in Israel, and we could end this thing forever.
Cenk, great to see you.
All right, great to see you.
Really good to chat over the issues. I wish you all the best for 2024.
Thank you.